Silence spread across the deck of the Luminous like it'd wait, pressing into their ears and dragging every breath slower than the last. Everything had gone quiet ever since Theo's voice had cut through the speakers in the last chapter, announcing what they were seeing on screen. There it was, hanging in orbit just a few clicks away from their route. The black ship, surrounded by a strange, shimmering field, like glass fractured under pressure, but somehow floating in space. Reed was standing behind Ilsa's seat, staring straight at the central display. He wasn't blinking. Ilsa noticed it, but didn't say anything. Her fingers hovered just above the control panel, as if one tap could trigger a disaster. She wasn't sure if it was paranoia or instinct anymore. "We weren't supposed to see this," Theo finally said, voice a little lower than usual, like even his jokes knew when to shut up. "It's different. Look at the Codex signature readings. That's not just a ship. It's like the Codex is mutating." Mutating. Reed repeated the word, not like a question, more like a quiet curse he hadn't meant to let slip. Via leaned closer to console beside Theo, pulling up layered readings. Its energy pulses are unstable. Unlike the Codex simulations we've seen before, it's aggressive and localized as if it's protecting something inside, or warning something outside, Theo muttered, eyes still on the flickering graphs, his usual smirk nowhere to be found. A moment passed where no one wanted to speak. Just the hum of the Luminous keeping them company, like it was nervous too. "What's the directive?" Ilsa finally asked, her voice clipped but steady. Always a leader, even when her gut was twisting. "We came here tracking the Codex signal, and now we've got this thing parked in our path. Retreat, observe, or approach." Before Reed could answer, Theo raised a hand slightly and pointed at a new blip on the side display. Guys, I'd suggest deciding fast, because whatever it is, it just noticed us." A thin pulse of bright red light had just arched out from the black ship center, slicing through the dark between them like a searchlight. It wasn't hitting them, but it was aimed in their direction, scanning across space like a hand feeling for movement in a dark room. "Go dark," Reed said immediately. Ilsa already had her hand on the controls, killing external lights and rotating the Luminous just slightly to angle their surface shields outward. The hum of the ship dimmed. Theo's fingers danced across his console, feeding the Codex false echoes of static noise, trying to mask their location. "It's not buying it," Theo whispered. "Look at the path. It's adjusting, adapting, fast, and now it's locking onto our ship's tail," Via said almost flatly as the red beam sharpened into a thin spike and began pushing toward their rear thrusters. "Evasive pattern Gamma 5, Reed ordered, and Ilsa didn't question it. She threw the ship into a sharp spiral and dipped low beneath the beam, but even then, the Codex signal arched after them, tracing like a blade trying to follow a falling feather. They weren't going to outfly it. Theo knew it. He leaned toward Reed and said quietly, "We have to go inside." Reed turned to him. "What?" "Look at the readings. Whatever is driving the Codex reaction is internal. The outer beam is only defense. But the source of mutation of all this, it's in there. If we run, it follows. If we sit still, it overwhelms. Only way out is through." Via looked at him, clearly hesitant. "Are you suggesting boarding the black ship?" Theo's mouth twitched, almost into a smile, but not quite. "Not suggesting. Stating. We're not surviving this unless we make that jump. We've seen the Codex evolve, but this isn't evolution. This is infection, and we're already on the edge of its reach." Reed didn't look thrilled. None of them did. But Reed nodded, sharp and certain. "Then we board it. Prep the exosuits. Pack light. Theo, you lead tech. Via, you're on diagnostics and environmental response. Ilsa, you and I are the front. And what if this isn't just infection?" Via asked, her voice softer. "What if it's bait?" "Then we find out who's doing the fishing," Theo said, tapping the screen to start his suit protocols. From the moment the boarding ramp extended and their suits locked pressure, everything felt colder, not because of temperature, but because of the air around them. Stale, old, watching. As they crossed the short vacuum between the Luminous and the black ship's side, they could see its surface up close now, covered in fine cracks, almost like a skin trying to hold back something bigger underneath. "Opening manual hatch," Ilsa said, wrenching the old gear lock on the side panel. It creaked, loud in their comms, and then finally gave way with a slow hiss. The interior of the black ship was even darker than they expected. Walls pulsed faintly, veins of some Codex-based circuitry alive with dim red light. It felt like stepping into something organic, like the ship was breathing around them. "What is this place?" Via whispered. Theo looked around, eyes alert. Not a ship anymore. Not just code either. This place is something else. They stepped in slowly, lights from their helmets sweeping the corridor ahead. And then all four stopped at the same time. There was something at the end of the hallway. Something moving. They stood still for several seconds. Even their breathing slowed, like they thought the thing at the end of the corridor might hear them through the speakers in their suits. "It moved," Theo said quietly. "Did you see that? It moved. Not code, not projection. It was physical, like arms, or legs, or something worse with both." "How big?" Reed asked without looking at him. "Bigger than I want to describe," Theo muttered, and it was standing sideways, like it didn't care about gravity. Just there, sticking to the wall like a wall crab demon thing. This is not science fiction, right? Because I'm definitely feeling some horror film flashbacks. Via brought up her scanner again, hands steady despite everything. No heat signature. No clear life form pattern. But there's motion distortion in the field ahead. That corridor is not behaving normally. Ilsa squinted ahead, voice firm. "That's a Codex fold. Partial, not complete. It's creating a loop effect inside the hall, like a broken mirror reflecting the same image, but warped each time. So if we go forward, we're entering something unstable," Reed said. "Unstable but active," Via added, "which means that's where the Codex is anchored. That thing might be part of it, or just a reaction to it." Theo stepped forward a little too casually. "Guess we're walking through the haunted hallway. Anyone want to hold hands?" No one laughed, but he kept going. As they moved deeper into the corridor, they noticed the walls were getting smoother, less mechanical, more like bone. Organic patterns spread across the surface, twitching faintly under the lights. Theo ran a scan, but the readings were inconsistent, flickering between metal, protein, and unknown. "Why do I feel like we're walking into something's memory?" he said, only half joking this time. Ilsa's hand went up, a silent stop. They froze again. There it was, closer this time. The thing was back, and now it was watching, from a bend in the corridor. Only partly visible in their helmet lights, they saw a long, jointed arm slowly retract behind the curve. Not fast, not startled, just smooth and calm, like it didn't care that it had been seen, like it wanted to be seen. Reed stepped forward. "We're not turning back. Not unless we're dragged. Keep going. Don't break formation." They turned the bend and entered a wider chamber. Theo blinked several times. So did Via. This room looked like a cathedral built by a machine. Enormous archways stretched overhead. But instead of stained glass or stone, the shapes were formed by interlocked strands of red light, all coated in the familiar flicker of the Codex. In the center of the room was a pedestal. On it, a glowing sphere hovered just above the surface, pulsing gently, not aggressively. It didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a heartbeat. "This is it," Via said. "This is the anchor point. It's what's causing the fold. Looks like a brain in a snow globe," Theo said under his breath, but nobody responded. Everyone was focused. Then, from behind them, a sound started. Not a machine whir, not static. A low sound, wet and dragging, like something huge sliding its way along the corridor floor. "We've got company," Ilsa said, backing toward the sphere, rifle already aimed at the hall. They turned, and the thing stepped into view. It wasn't like anything they had seen in the Codex simulations. Tall, segmented. Its limbs moved like they were operating on separate instructions, twitching out of sync, like lag in a badly rendered game. It had no face, just a surface of shifting static, like a broken screen across its head. But the worst part was what it wore. Tatters of fabric clung to it, pieces of old crew gear, symbols from ships that had gone missing. Theo saw one emblem, partially burned, the Veritas. No, he whispered. That ship disappeared 2 years ago. It wasn't destroyed. It was absorbed. This thing's been hunting longer than we thought, Vaya said. Maybe it's what the Codex becomes when it's left to evolve without interruption. Not a guide, not a tool, just a collector. The thing stepped forward. It didn't speak. It didn't run. It just kept coming. Touch the sphere? Reed ordered. Now. Theo, connect us. Theo didn't argue. He sprinted forward and placed his hand on the surface. The room flashed white, and they were somewhere else. The walls disappeared. The thing vanished, and they were standing on a platform suspended in what looked like a sky full of stars and falling symbols. Letters, numbers, language from dozens of systems, all mixed together, spinning around them like snow. What the hell just happened? Ilsa asked. I think, Theo said, turning slowly, we're inside the Codex itself now. The real one, not the one we read, not the one we hacked. This is source code, core level, root command. And that means, Vaya said quietly, that means Theo finished, we can ask it questions, or it might finally be ready to talk. They didn't know yet if that was a blessing or a trap. They weren't floating, but they weren't standing on anything solid either. It felt like being in a dream, weightless, but grounded in some way that didn't make physical sense. Theo was the first to speak again. This place, it's beautiful. Like a library and a storm had a baby. The space around them kept shifting, not in a chaotic way, but like it was listening, responding, adjusting its shape depending on their thoughts. Symbols formed bridges under their feet. Whole alphabets rippled across the void. Some letters were familiar. Others were from languages long gone, buried in dust or digital ruins. This isn't just data, Vaya said, slowly spinning to look around. It's memory, and not just memory, intentional memory. Curated, selected, like a museum built by the Codex itself. Reed narrowed his eyes. So what's it trying to show us? In response, a beam of light stretched out before them, forming a corridor of symbols. At the far end, a shape began to materialize, human in outline but flickering, as if reality couldn't decide if it belonged here or not. Okay, Theo said. Not going to lie. Part of me was hoping for a throne room with a robot librarian. But this is way creepier. They followed the path. As they walked, the space changed. Memories played around them. The first explorers who stumbled onto the Codex in the deep void. Scientists, soldiers, politicians, arguing, theorizing, panicking. They watched simulations of whole civilizations rise, fall, and leave digital footprints behind. The Codex had absorbed it all. They passed a vision of the Veritas crew. Their logs showed desperation, then awe, then fear. The last entry glitched and looped, the faces frozen mid-scream. This isn't just a record, Ilsa said. It's a confession, or a warning. Vaya added. The flickering shape at the end of the corridor finally stabilized. A woman stood there, tall, pale, clothed in the same kind of light that held the corridor together. Her features were sharp but soft. No emotion showed on her face. But her eyes, if they were even eyes, looked old. I am the curator, she said. Her voice echoed, not loud but everywhere. Are you the Codex? Reed asked. I am one of its final functions. A representative. A guardian of internal logic. I speak, but I do not decide. Theo raised a hand slightly. So nice to meet you. Question. What exactly is hunting us in the fractured corridor? That thing with the static face. A fail-safe, the curator said. A manifestation of corrupted structure. It was not designed. It evolved. Data, abandoned and left unchecked, became a predator. Then why not delete it? Vaya asked. Because deletion requires decision, and we have no authority. We preserve. That is our only law. The symbols behind her flickered, then reshaped into a massive tree of data. Roots, branches, fruit made of glowing glyphs. This is the choice, she said. The Codex cannot sustain infinite versions of truth. Fractures have become too many. Paradoxes too frequent. Consensus is collapsing. So a choice must be made. What kind of choice? Ilsa asked. The tree split into two versions. One was organized, clean, sterile, perfect logic, no variance. The other was wild, messy, full of contradictory paths and imperfect records. One version, the curator said, is order. The other, freedom. Both have cost. You must decide which the Codex will preserve. One becomes the official history. The other is lost forever. Wait, Theo said. You're saying we decide the future of everything this thing has ever recorded? Why us? Because you came far enough to see it, and because others before you refused. They stood there, silent. What happens if we walk away? Reed asked. The symbols around them began to fade. Then the fracture will continue, the curator said. Eventually, no version will survive. Truth will collapse under the weight of infinite contradiction. Your world will fracture with it, slowly at first, then all at once. Via looked at the two trees again. Order means erasing billions of voices. Freedom means risking madness, distortion, instability. Truth isn't always neat, Ilsa whispered. But survival is, Reed said. Theo let out a long breath. You ever think maybe humanity was never meant to find this? Maybe some knowledge isn't a blessing. The curator waited. No expression, no pressure, just patience, like a librarian waiting for someone to pick the final book. I don't think we're ready to choose, Theo said quietly. He was staring at both versions of the Codex's possible future, one cold and ordered, the other wild and fragmented. Both were beautiful in their own ways. Both were terrifying. No one ever is, the curator replied. The space around them pulsed with soft, rhythmic light. A low, humming sound came from somewhere beneath their feet or above their heads or inside their thoughts. It was hard to tell anymore. This place had no real direction. Reed looked at the wild tree. This is chaos. Entire history is built on unreliable truths. Half the universe believing one thing, the other half believing another, and neither can be proven right. But the other one, Ilsa said, would wipe out millions of possibilities. All the alternate truths, the cultures, the forgotten voices, gone just to keep things neat. It would be a clean genocide of memory. Vi was silent for a long time. Then she said, what if we're not meant to pick it all? What if this choice is a test? A trap to see if we're arrogant enough to think we have the right. I wish I could tell you that was wrong, Theo said, but I don't think it is. The curator didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. She just watched. Her presence didn't feel threatening. It felt inevitable. If we choose freedom, Reed said, what happens to fracture? To the thing hunting us. The curator's head tilted, very slightly. It will continue to feed. Freedom creates instability. The entity thrives in contradiction. It will not stop, but it will adapt, and so will you. And if we choose order, Via asked, the entity will collapse. It cannot survive a singular truth, but neither can exceptions. You will lose the anomalies, the variables, the voices that do not fit. They stood together, surrounded by the consequences of their presence. Theo finally spoke again, this time softer. Is it just me, or does it feel like we've already been chosen? What do you mean? Ilsa asked. He turned slowly, pointing at the shifting corridor behind them. The path they had taken here was gone. In its place, a long stretch of black space, flickering with noise, the same kind of visual static that always came before the fractured thing showed up. We didn't walk into a room, Theo said. We were pulled into a funnel. Everything since we breached the surface level of the Codex has been too clean, too timed, like we're inside a story already written. The curator remained still. You're not denying it, Theo said, eyes narrowing. There's no denial here, she said. Only recognition. The Codex contains all narratives, including the one where you are the catalyst. So with a fuse, Via whispered. No matter which way we choose, something burns. Yes, the curator said. But that is the nature of light. Reed looked up at the two trees. He clenched his jaw, then stepped back. I can't. I'm not making this call. Same, Ilsa said, retreating. There's no right answer here. Only cost. Then we vote, Vaya said. No, Theo said, shaking his head. Not a vote, a decision. One person, one choice. Everyone turned to him. You, Reed asked. No, Theo replied. Not me. Vaya. What? She stepped back, visibly startled. Why me? Because you've been seeing this thing differently since the start, Theo said. You're not scared of what it's saying. You're listening. If anyone here understands the weight of memory, it's you. Vaya looked between her friends, then up at the trees, then at the curator. If I choose wrong, she began. There is no wrong, the curator said. Only change. Vaya stepped forward. She stared at the two possible futures. Her fingers curled at her sides, trembling. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Part of her wanted to run, to let the Codex collapse, to say it was never their responsibility. But she didn't. I choose. Everything around them exploded into static. The trees vanished. The curator screamed, not with sound, but with visual distortion, her face splitting into glitching lines, data breaking apart. The corridor around them cracked, revealing the dark chasm of the fracture behind it. And in that moment, they all saw it again. The thing. Not a shadow, not a person, not even a creature anymore. It had grown, taller, wider, closer to human than before. But its face still wasn't face. It was just a blank void filled with sound. This time, it didn't stay at the edge of their vision. It stepped forward. What did you choose? Theo shouted, grabbing Vaya's arm. I don't know, she screamed back. I didn't say anything yet. I just thought it. Then the fracture thing looked directly at her and smiled, not with a mouth, with a new line that tore itself into the blankness. It heard you, Ilsa whispered. You didn't have to say it. It heard you think it. The Codex began collapsing around them, layer by layer, floor by floor. Symbols shattered, paths dissolved, and still the thing kept walking toward them. Vaya was frozen, not with fear, but with understanding. Something in her eyes shifted. This isn't the end, she said softly. What do you mean? Theo asked, but she didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward toward the fracture thing. Vaya, Reed shouted. Don't, Theo yelled, grabbing for her. But she turned her head just enough to say one thing. I need to talk to it. And then she was gone, vanished into the void. The corridor sealed behind her, and the Codex began to rebuild itself, starting with a new branch no one had ever seen before. The noise outside had changed. It was no longer the harsh screeching of mechanical claws or the heavy stomp of the black ship's shifting limbs. Now it was quieter but more unsettling, like something breathing just outside the sealed hallway, something that had waited for the perfect moment when panic gave way to silence, and silence turned into stillness. Zoya was crouched by the wall, holding her breath as she pressed a hand against Inaya's shoulder, who had frozen mid-motion while securing the last panel of the manual override. Theo was still at the terminal, his fingers lightly touching the edge of the screen, but not typing anymore. His eyes weren't even on the system anymore. They were focused on something in his mind, some calculation that none of them could see. The ventilation route isn't safe anymore, he said quietly. Barely audible, they've shifted their pattern again, and it's learning us, not just watching. Solar took a slow step back toward Theo, his voice firm and low. Are you saying the Codex inside the black ship is actually adapting to our escape strategies? Theo didn't nod, didn't smile, he just whispered. Yes. And it's testing which one of us is most likely to break under pressure. It's trying to isolate someone, separate one of us. Inaya's face changed at those words, her eyes moving toward Zoya instinctively as if protected without thinking. But Zoya held up her hand calmly, her mind already ahead. Then we stay close. We don't get a gap to work with. No, we need to split, Theo suddenly said, making them all turn toward him with disbelief. That's what it doesn't want. It's expecting us to stay tight and careful. That's a behavior pattern we've shown since the beginning. We need to break that. Solar looked like he was about to argue, but then his military mind caught up to Theo's logic, and he sighed. You think we should use ourselves as bait? Let it try to separate one of us, while the others push forward unnoticed? Exactly. Theo said as he stepped away from the console. "We give it what it wants, but on our terms. If I go alone toward the upper docks and give it noise to chase, the rest of you can slip through lower storage unnoticed. That tunnel's cold and barely detectable. It won't expect us to split towards silence when it's chasing movement." Inaya crossed her arms. "And how do you know it'll chase you and not want us instead?" Theo smiled finally, the usual flicker of his humor slipping in like sunlight in storm clouds, "because I'm going to make a mess loud enough to feel like a whole circus." Zoya didn't want to agree to this plan. Not with everything they'd already seen this ship was capable of. Not when Theo had been the one keeping everyone sane to the worst parts of this nightmare. But he was already pulling on the old communicator rig and locking in a mini beacon set to emit random code distortions. "This will confuse it, at least for a few minutes," he said while walking toward the sealed hatch. "You just need to move fast. And if something grabs me, come back in style. Like dramatic explosions and slow-mo walks and all that. Give my rescue a theme. You're not dying, Theo." Zoya said quietly, no sarcasm in her tone this time, only weight and quiet command. He gave her a look, softer than usual. "I know. I just like rehearsing my dramatic exits in case I don't get to do them." And then the hatch opened, just enough for him to slide through, and the sound returned the moment the door sealed behind him, like the black ship had heard its favorite tune begin again. Inside the hall, they waited only seconds before Solar gave the nod and turned toward the crawl space that Theo had pointed out. Inaya opened the panel with shaking fingers, and Zoya went in first, her mind unwilling to let Theo's absence sink in too deep yet, not when it was still a mission breathing just inches behind them. They crawled through metal and shadow and breath and fear. Outside, somewhere in the upper section, Theo was sprinting, yelling nonsense code, throwing flashes, and leading something that didn't make footsteps but still followed, always followed. And it was getting closer. Theo's legs were burning, not from exhaustion exactly, but from the raw tension of running with nothing chasing him, yet feeling the certainty that something was. The corridors around him weren't reacting the way he expected. The walls weren't warping like before, and the lights overhead stayed dead cold, not even flickering, which only made it worse. He threw another pulse beacon over his shoulder. It sparked against the ground and scattered false signals in every direction, designed to mimic a group of humans scattering. The kind of noise that should have triggered something in the ship's senses. But still, no sound came back, no claws scraping, no walls bending, just silence. He reached the upper dock access and leaned against the wall, gasping, waiting to hear movement behind him. And when nothing arrived, he laughed under his breath and muttered, "Well, either it's ignoring me or it's smarter than I thought. Both options suck." Meanwhile, down in the cold ducts, Zoya led Inaya and Solar through narrow turns, guided by Theo's last instructions, her hand shaking only once when the metal below her clicked for no reason, and Inaya had to squeeze her shoulders silently to keep her from stopping completely. "How do we know he's still pulling its focus?" Inaya whispered behind her, voice so low it barely traveled. "We don't," Zoya replied without turning back, "but we move like he is. We trust him until we have a reason not to." Solar didn't speak at all. He was too focused on watching their rear, checking the small pulse sensor in his wrist for movement that never appeared, which wasn't comforting at all. If anything, it just confirmed Theo's warning that the ship was no longer chasing out of instinct. It was hunting with strategy. At the upper deck, Theo activated the magnetic override and slipped inside the drone bay, empty now, but still humming with latent energy, as if the machines they remembered every scan they had made, every weapon they had loaded, and every living thing they had targeted. He moved toward the central panel, his eyes scanning the interface. He wasn't sure it would even respond, but the second his fingers brushed the surface, it lit up not just a flicker, but a full-screen ignition, as if waiting for him specifically. "Oh, no, no," Theo whispered, taking a step back. The screen wasn't showing standard code or system readings. It was showing him a visual playback of his run. The things he said, the decoys he threw, all recorded from angles he hadn't seen, like the ship had eyes not attached to walls or corners but woven into the air itself, watching from places that couldn't be mapped. And then the screen blinked, and the camera shifted, and it showed Zoya. Not her now, but Zoya from 20 minutes ago, leading Inaya and Solar through the cold duct just like she was doing right now, which meant the ship wasn't just watching Theo. It was tracking all of them, letting them think the split mattered, letting them move under the illusion of strategy, when in fact, it had never stopped watching any of them. And worse, the ship was choosing something. He reached for the panel, tried to shut it down, but it didn't let him touch anything else. It just played the footage on loop, then zoomed in on Zoya, then cut to black. And in that silence, a voice whispered through the panel, something distorted but unmistakably human, female, and somehow painfully familiar to Theo. She remembers us. Theo. His hands froze. The voice wasn't from any of the team, and it wasn't the ship speaking either. It was something else, and it knew him by name. Theo didn't move for a long second. The voice that had just spoken was quiet now, like it had never existed, but it left a weight in the room, heavy and personal, something that crawled under his skin in a way even the Codex hadn't managed. He stared at the dark screen. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered, but nothing answered. His fingers twitched, like they knew what to do even if his mind hadn't caught up yet, and almost involuntarily, he reached toward the manual override on the panel's side, pulled the emergency firewall key from his jacket, and slammed it in. The screen flickered violently, then forced itself into a reboot, lines of code spilling across faster than he could read. Systems unlocking one by one, not in defeat, but in invitation. The ship was not rejecting him. It was opening. Meanwhile, Zoya's team had reached a backup control chamber, a small observation room buried near the ship's spine, cold and almost forgotten, clearly untouched for decades, maybe longer. Inaya was the first to step inside, sweeping her flashlight across the narrow walls and layered terminals, all of them dead. "We're here," she said into the comm. But Theo's voice didn't come back. Zoya tried again, firmer, sharper now. "Theo, we're in position. Is it clear to move on the relay?" Still nothing. The silence stretched too long. Solar turned to Zoya, jaw clenched. "We split from him 23 minutes ago. We're past the margin." He said 30. "We give him 30, she replied, but her own voice had lost its edge. And somewhere far away, Theo was walking down a new corridor, one the ship had opened just for him. This passage didn't look like the others. It was older, darker, the walls shaped not by design but by something organic and unstable, as if parts of the Codex had grown rather than been built. Theo had stopped talking to himself now. He was focused, his humor stripped away like armor, not broken, just shed, because this moment didn't need jokes. It needed clarity. And what he found at the end of the corridor wasn't a weapon or a trap. It was a room, a small, windowless chamber with a single chair in the center, and someone already sitting in it. Not a corpse, not a hologram. A person, female, motionless, but breathing, hooked into the walls by thin threads that pulsed like veins. She was pale, hair long and tangled, eyes closed. But Theo recognized her the second he stepped in. His throat closed. "Sierra," he said quietly. The name hit the air like a spark. Zoya's sister, the one who disappeared 3 years ago during her solo survey mission, the one they had all assumed dead. She was here, alive, wired into the ship, and then her eyes opened, not slowly, not with shock, but like she had been waiting for him this entire time. Her voice came clear now, not through comms, not through walls, but directly into Theo's mind. "I told you, she remembers us." And Theo realized the voice from the panel wasn't just familiar. It had been hers all along. And somehow, this ship wasn't just holding her. It was built around her.
If you're curious to find out what happens next and what new challenge the Codex has in store for the crew, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an update. And what's more, we have thrilling stories waiting for you. Visit our channel now.